Oh, there's a great ring. I have no idea.
This is basically going to be about disability in the church. No particular direction.
Okay. Do you want my mic?
And there are no.
Oh, good.
Okay. I mean, not this second.
All right. Okay.
Lori and Jack, are you guys coming down to this? Or I'm not calling you out. I just meant if you're staying, come down. Yeah, that's all.
Nah.
Either stop talking in the back or come down. Yeah.
There we go.
But I think we're probably
Ready?
ready to get started. And in the absence of anyone else to MC, I'll act like I own the place.
All right. You do.
At least I have a master key to
There you go.
important doors. Thank you for agreeing to this.
Of course.
I know that you each have some things you want to say, and then you'll probably want to engage the rest of us in some Q&A or discussion. So
That's fine.
Absolutely.
thank you both.
I would like to echo what Dr. Shore just said. Thank you for participating with this, Dr. Satterlee. For those who don't know, a couple of years ago, I joined the seminary with the belief that I was being called to ministry. I don't know if I still have that call, but one thing that I needed to realize was I needed to stop answering that call and focus a little more on myself and finding my own voice before I dared to speak to God. Something that I've encountered within this seminary, different congregations, as well as discernment of the call to ministry through different denominations, is persecution not for being blind, but for being different. And then people wanting to put that difference on my disability. And so I was hoping that maybe we could have a discussion about what the challenges you've encountered as a disabled minister, as well as some of the problems you knew congregants who you could empathize with because of your disability.
So I could talk about this all day, but I won't. I believe that the church on earth is a finite thing. Does that make sense? We can't do everything and be excellent at everything. So our inclusion is in every level or expression of the church, while we want it to be boundless, it is not. Does that make sense? In the ELCA, we have worked to embrace issues of race, culture, diversity, and sexual orientation. Did I say gender too? Gender too. No, I did. Those are the big five, or four, whatever it is. And I think that takes all of our energy. And so disabilities, while some of us think it should be, it doesn't make the list in the ELCA. Now, when I go to Notre Dame, because I spend time there on campus, they get disability really good. I wonder if it's because they have big families and they probably all know a relative that's disabled. They get disability really good. Some would say they don't get women really well, and some would say they don't get sexual orientation really well. They get the poor and they get the refugees really well. You see what I'm saying? So everybody, I think, it's taken me 30-some years of ministry to get here. Everybody does their best, but can't do everything. And we happen to be in a church where disability is not on the map.
That makes sense,
Yep.
and that fits what I've
Yep.
seen, pardon the pun.
Yep.
But, so with that being said, is that fine? Is there anything that you recommend that we could do to change that, if it needs changing?
Sure. I mean, I think as a church we need to decide, do we care? The Lutheran Youth Organization was the one that pushed for, at the couple of church-wide assemblies ago, including the people with persons with disability in the campaign for the ELCA, right? And it didn't do as well as the other stuff. So based on the campaign, I would say it's not a priority. And I said so in the Conference of Bishops. And Bishop Eaton said, so you want it to be a priority? I said, no, I think it's probably better that we own that it's not. So we need to be honest with ourselves as far as who we are, right? Because I think it's okay to say you're welcome in our church and be welcome. It's okay to say you're not welcome in our church and not be welcome. It's not okay to say you're welcome in our church. You have to say, yeah, you're welcome and not be welcome. Okay? So one of my pet peeves is I'm really weary and exhausted by if you are able. Stand if you are able. Because what that makes us do is go, see, we've been welcoming. We're excused. And you want to say, welcome us if you are able. We don't say, sing if you are able, right? We don't. But if you're able, right? Now on the one hand, I can say all this, and on the other hand, I understand that I'm a pastor who became a professor who is a bishop who can't drive a car. And when I interviewed for a call, that was the big issue is, how can you be a pastor if you can't drive a car? So one call committee said, what will you do to visit? And I talked about volunteers and, we didn't have Uber then. Now I would call Uber. But, well, what happens if it's like the middle of the night and the volunteers won't come? And I said, well, I will call a cab. There is no taxi cab in our town. So I said, oh, the parsonage is right next to the police station, right? And they're like, yep. And I said, well, if the police are my next door neighbors, I'm going to get to know the police. So if we're having an emergency, I will go over to my next door neighbor, the police, who I've got to know, and say, could you run me to so-and-so's house because we have an emergency? What if the police say no? And I said, well, then I'll go in the house and I'll call the family having the emergency and say, I'm sorry, your brothers and sisters in Christ won't bring you. There's no cab, and the cops said no. Could you come and meet me at the church? I'm really sorry. And what if they say no? I said, so they're having an emergency and need the pastor, but won't come and meet at the church. Right. I said, I will go to bed. See, you can't be a pastor if you can't drive a car. So that's the bias. And yet, I have found congregations, big and small, where that wasn't even an issue. Where I had one driver, volunteer driver, in my second call who said, I will be your volunteer driver, except I am only available from 11 p.m. to 8 a.m. So in the middle of the night, you called Nancy, and she showed up with coffee. I had a church of 13 people in graduate school, and one of them was my driver. So they're there, My synod, which is 3,288 square miles, called, has a bishop that cannot drive. And I'm probably one of the more, we visit a lot. They hired my wife as my driver. So I have a driver, and they save money because we get one hotel instead of two.
I want to thank you for that because thanks to you, that wasn't an issue with my synod.
Right.
However, what became an issue was them saying, well, of course we'll have to place you in a place with a lot of Uber or one of those ride-sharing apps. And then I felt the need to get into an argument with them. I'm adaptable. I'm innovative. All these things that you were suggesting
Right.
that you could do, Bishop Satterlee, were things I was telling them.
Well, see, they're thinking they need to provide for you.
Exactly.
So, so the question is, you can ask how I'm going to do stuff. You can't assume that I can't do it, and you can't say, here's how you will do it.
Right.
Yep.
And so what I'm
Yep.
leading to, and I believe the answer is going to be yes here, but do you feel that when it comes to specifically disability, there's no desire to relate, only to sympathize? A little extreme, I'm sorry. There's more of an inclination to sympathize with somebody with a disability rather than trying to relate to them or have their different.
I would say that we are more ready to welcome than to have people with disabilities as leaders, is what I would say. Yeah, I think that's what I would say. And what I've also perceived as in this office is congregations think at some level, they can't articulate it, but many of them think, I don't want to draw a blanket, what's wrong with us that we have to have a pastor who lives with a disability? Yeah. Yeah. Weigh in?
Yeah.
Please.
Well, you just, the last two things you said, and I don't want to overwrite your.
No, please do.
But I have long thought, well, I was in my first call, and I was interviewing for a second call, and I stayed overnight with this older couple who were delightful hosts, and we had a great visit. The interview hadn't gone that well, but we had a really good visit with these two people. And as I went out to the rental car, the woman clipped a rose from her rose bush and gave it to me, and the man said, wow, we just had such a wonderful visit. We'll put in a good word for you. And then he said, and we're not the church we used to be. We might have to take a woman.
That's it. Yep.
And I have not made the connection with
Yep.
disability.
Yep.
That there's something about the sort of 35-year-old male with a wife.
Yep. And the two kids and the dog.
Exactly. That makes us feel like we're a real church.
Right, exactly.
Instead of, okay, it's different. This person is not that, but they're called and by God and possibly also by us.
Exactly. And we're at 50 years of the ordination of women, and we're still dealing with this nonsense. Right?
Yeah, I know.
So, and that's women, and the church has blessed that. So disability is way behind. Yep. But yes, the connection it's the same thing. Yep. What is it about us that we, yeah.
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 It's unfortunate because of course, what often happens in these cases is, people settle.
Right.
And they realize, oh my gosh.
We've been blessed.
What a gift.
Yeah. And I'm the first person that with a disability, I won't say blind because we've had blind bishops before in one way or the other.
But I'm Ching.
Yeah. But, this is a new experience for the Conference of Bishops and for the church-wide organization. And I'm work. So it's like, and now we're going to show you the PowerPoint presentation. Well, yeah. And I said, well, I did email and ask for PowerPoint. Well, you can't just have it done 30 seconds before and show it on the screen if you're going to give Craig a copy. You see what I'm saying? I'm work. Kathy says, my wife, were you nice or were you a pain in the ass to them this trip? So there's that part of it too.
Yes, I know. I'm very familiar with that one.
Yep. So
did you ever get compliment not for your sermon, what was in the content, but the fact that you didn't need to use a manuscript?
Oh, certainly. And I'll take that compliment.
Yeah, that is rather nice.
What I realized is the first 6 weeks in a place, all they're going is, he's blind and he can do it. So you just have to give him that. That too is good. Yep.
I'm so happy to have someone who can empathize here.
Yeah.
I've been waiting 2 years. But So this sounds, very much like I have a good idea about, the leadership and why it's difficult to be a leader and disabled in the clergy, but we have church councils, we have different ministries where you can be a layperson and not even have a title and be a leader in a congregation.
And that's what the church, yes, we have an undersupply of pastors,
Right.
and boy, do we need lay leaders.
And so do you think
Yeah.
that's still that what we're talking about with disability as a problem for the clergy is same for lay leaders?
I don't know, because you're serving in a community where you've been and belong, and you're theirs and they're yours, and so I don't know. I confess I've never been on a church council because I was kind of a pipeliner guy, so I don't know.
I'm formerly Catholic, so I don't know. I don't
Yeah,
know Lutheranism from the lay point of
Right.
view too much.
Yep. As I say, the Catholic Church, I think, is pretty accepting of people who live with disabilities, at least in my experience.
That's because we got so much persecution for it, to the point where it just hit a breaking point. It's a great example of conflict theory.
Okay.
Your earlier comment, and Bishop Satterlee, reminded me of a comment a friend of mine used to make about being, or blackness was his handicap in America. I don't know that I've ever
Mhm.
gone to
Mm.
Lenore Ryan without somebody asking me about my role at Lutheran Theological Southern Seminary. And then the next question is, you do have a PhD, right? Wow. It happens today, and it happens with great frequency. Or something about you teach here, what do you teach? But yeah, that's a very real thing that I've experienced, that I know, and that I've learned how to navigate.
Yeah.
And learning how to navigate is really the key. It's not my problem, it's your problem.
Right.
Yes.
That's exactly right. Yep.
One thing I find, one more thing about this that I'd like to discuss about disability, and then I'd like to open up to questions, is whenever I try to discuss a problem with my disability or a problem with the problem that I have a disability, the response I get is, well, it's okay, Nick, because everybody's broken. And I'm not trying to refute that, but what bothers me is that my brokenness has a name. It has a label. Your brokenness, also Dr. Satterlee, has a label as well, but some don't. Some, as Dr. Shore and Dr. Thomas mentioned, that there are other cultural factors that can be, but sometimes, actually I would say most of the time, I don't have that empathy where someone's willing to give me a label to go against or go with disability. And so I was wondering how you've experienced that, if you have.
Well, I think we get in trouble when we get into hierarchies of brokenness, which is kind of what happens. So I think that's one piece, because, as a church, we have favorite hierarchies of brokenness. The piece that I have found helpful is out of a book called Copious Hosting. And the author said, here is the reality of being a person who lives with a disability in the church. If you can do your job without assistance, you don't get the assistance you need. And if you need assistance to do your job, you're incompetent. So it's almost a double bind, is what I experience. And that may be true for women and for African Americans. It may be true. But I experienced it as a person with a disability, that if you need assistance, if you do perfect, oh great, then we don't have to do anything. And if you have to do anything, then you must be incompetent.
That's a big balance that I struggle
So
with.
walking that balance is very, very hard. I think a lot about FDR, who had to be very careful where his disability shone.
Thank you very much,
Yep.
sir. Is there anything that you'd like to comment on based on my discussion? Because I believe I brought up all the points
Nope,
that I
I
wanted
think-
to.
Be happy to answer any questions, or
Does anyone here have any questions that they would like to bring up?
I heard a voice.
Lori Gladiness.
Hey,
Hey. Michigan represented in the House.
exactly.
One of the things that I want to lift up in Dr. Drigger's Gospel class, he asked us and had us read a book by Karen Black, the 2 chapters, A Healing Homiletic. And
Mm-hmm.
I have to say that I really lift up LTSS for the directions that we're taking in our classes and, the focuses that we're looking at. Now, recognizing that one of the ways to change the church is to change the thoughts of pastors. And in our seminaries. Beyond that, the purpose was to look at the healing stories in the gospel. Beyond that, Bishop Satterlee, is there anything that you can recommend for us as pastoral students, seminarians, that we can, or even the seminary can do to help better prepare us to look at the wholeness of the person?
Yeah. So if you like to read, I would point you could Google my name and Learning to Picture God from Those Who Cannot See, which I wrote for the Societas Homiletica, the International Society of Homiletics. Yep, it's an article, it's online, Learning to Picture God from Those Who Cannot See. Yep. I think you're doing a great thing at Southern if you're asking people to read, to look at go into the Bible and say, how are we reading this from a disabled perspective, right? Because Scripture really turns people who live with disabilities into objects, right? Whose job is to get healed. So they're props, except for like Bartimaeus or the man in John, they're often just props to show Jesus' healing power. So
It is going back to Nick's statement about Nick being broken. No, Nick is perfect as he is. I think we have a tendency to not be able to ourselves not be able to put a name to that, and so I'm a little emotional.
Thank you for the affirmation.
And I would just say that I have about 30 seconds every day where it really sucks to be blind. And you got to own that piece of it too. And, you got to have kind of coping skills and people that'll, help you cover when you need to.
I call them the disability doldrums.
There you go. Yeah, yeah. So we just know that if you want a quick response to an email from me, you should write Renee Dixon. If Jim Johnson's still here, he can tell you that, right? If you send Craig an email, you'll get it eventually. But if you need a quick response, you send Renee, and Renee will walk into my office and say, Jim Johnson just emailed, and he needs to know blah, blah, blah. And I will say, blah, blah, blah. And she will send the email back, because email's visual, right?
Jim figured that out with
Yeah.
phone calls instead.
So I have people around me that make me look good. And you just got to do that. So, yeah.
Yeah, so my name is Kimmy, and I'm a student here at LTSS. And I'm from Columbia. And I will tell the truth that I had no idea that the ELCA had a board bishop. So my eyes have been opened.
Well, very good. And like I say, we've had them before. They just saw well.
We appreciate the pun.
Didn't view it that way. But something that I'm very active in with the South Carolina Synod is the Beloved Ministry. And it's not known church-wide yet, but hopefully soon. We started in Columbia, but now we're expanding into Pickens and I know there's some Pickens. Yeah. In the Greenville area, in Greer area. And we're a ministry for families to come who have children or young adults who feel like they're not accepted by the church because of their disability. And so how can us little beloved impact the whole church? There's one day that I sat down with a deacon that was in Columbia, and we called the ELCA church-wide office and spoke to the lady who's over whatever her CAP is, special needs, and she had no idea
No.
what was going on in the church. And so now as being a seminarian, and whenever I have opportunity to write a paper, I write on how to say all are welcome.
Mm-hmm.
To have families and young adults and children active in a worship service, no matter who they are. So how can a passion of mine affect, the whole church?
Are we live streamed?
Yeah, I guess.
Then I need to be careful what I say here.
While you're figuring that out, Bishop Satterlee, something that I would recommend is treating disability like any other culture, age, gender, race. It's not, for me, blindness isn't an impairment, but just another way of understanding the world. And I think you could say that of multiple other disabilities as well, especially the hard of hearing community and the deaf community particularly resemble that. They have a great passion for not being able to voice but sign.
I think you're looking for strategy, right, Kimmy? And I'm not sure that going up, if you will, is the best way to do it. You may want to go out. So you may want to reach out to North Carolina Synod, right? You see what I'm saying? And have it spread this way rather than to go up and be disseminated. Am I being appropriately vague?
I thought that was possibly the most diplomatic thing you said.
Okay. Oh, am I going to get phone calls? Yeah,
And Kimmy, while you were talking, I was
Yeah.
thinking of Monica Hammerston, who does a very similar thing in the Minneapolis area. And she would love to know about your program, and I'll get you guys in touch. So there really is a wonderful kind of network
Yeah.
in the church of people who know people that gets things done in ways that just gets harder to do them when you try to go up.
Right.
It seems like it shouldn't get harder, but it does. And I don't know why, and I don't know that we need to diagnose it
Nope.
anyway.
Nope.
But the grassroots thing could be really amazing. And then maybe the power that's up or the money that's up, whether that's Synod or churchwide or somewhere else,
Yeah.
can meet that grassroots power and work together. But I want to put you in touch with. She was one of my advisees at Luther, and she said they started a ministry for people who had stopped coming to church because their children were unruly,
Right.
autistic, difficult somehow, this was at Mount Olivet, is that the big?
In Minneapolis. Yeah.
And when they first did the ministry, they asked people, you know, bring a spare change of clothes or, you know, whatever you think we might need. And they had one volunteer for every one kid. And she said to her volunteers, no matter what happens in this hour, when mom and dad pick up their child and they ask, how did it go? We say, it was great. It was great. Even if what has happened is, you know,
Abysmal.
really
Yeah,
hard.
yeah.
Really hard. We don't say, your child was really hard. We say, this was great. We were glad to have him here.
If I may, I found the article and I linked it to the live stream on Facebook.
God bless you. Yep.
Thank you all.
Can I tell one story?
Oh, yeah.
So we got to the question and answer election, part of the bishop's election, the first time out, and they asked us about staffing. And one of the other candidates, who's become a good friend, kind of like laid out his staff and said, "Why?" And I'm gonna try something new. I'm gonna say to you folks, once a month I'd like to hire a driver so that I can catch up on my work. You know. So they turned to me and they said, Dr. Satterlee, how are you going to staff the Synod? And I said, well, I think I need to get to know the Synod before we figure out staffing, but I got to tell you, I'm going to need a driver every day just to get to work. And you could, like, how is that going to, and they broke into laughter. And I think in the room, then everybody knew it would be okay. So for me, part of the hope, whether it's African Americans, people of African descent, women, gender, disability, is to hang on to the confidence that the Spirit is at work in our church. And we may not know the day that the Spirit shoves a part of the church in a certain direction. So we live with hope. That's all.
Thank you.
Thank you.